joined by Chris Buskirk, editor of American Greatness. And Chris is going to be speaking on one of our panels this afternoon on family policy and middle-class prosperity. Chris, what are you looking forward to about the panel? What do you think we should be discussing today?
Well, first of all, I'm looking forward to talking to Helen Andrews, who's moderating the panel, and she's great. And so she and I have been sort of corresponding back and forth a little bit about the panel. I guess the one of the themes that I want to underscore that we'll be talking about out there today is that national prosperity and middle class prosperity are intimately, I would say inextricably tied to family prosperity. Like, you can't have national prosperity in a way that is meaningful or worthwhile if you don't have family prosperity, and the family is really the basis of the middle class. And so the question becomes, well, how do we do that?
Yeah.
Like, we had it once. We have less of it now, not none, but we have less of it now than we did in, say, 1970. Where did it go, and how do we get it back?
Yeah. And I'm curious, what do you think since 1970? What has changed so that we've had economic growth, but many would say that's been at the expense of institutions like the family. I mean, can you unpack that a little bit? What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I would start with the basis, and that is that we have had less real economic growth than GDP numbers would suggest. I mean, GDP is basically a measure of consumption. Whereas I would say that a better way to think about economic growth is our living standards rising for the average person. And that really has not been the case for the past 50 years. There's obviously been some places where we've seen things that are interesting and have progressed. There have been places within healthcare that have been interesting, not as much as people think. I mean, the median age, median longevity hasn't really moved that much in 50 years. But if you think back to, say, 1970, like, how different is the lifestyle that people lead now? I mean, the refrigerator, the TV, I mean, they're improved at the margin. Sure, we were just talking about what's 4K, high def.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great, but does that fundamentally make your life better in the way that, say, well, I guess let me say it this way. There's a difference between the invention of television and just getting a better picture on your television. Yeah. And so, the economic growth that we've been measuring over the past, since GDP became the main measure of growth, is just consumption. Right, so at a very simple level, put it this way, we've had more women go into the workforce since 1970. It was, in round numbers, from about 30% to about 65%. Okay, that means what? It means you have to buy work clothes, and you have to buy more gas to drive to your job, and you have to buy another car.
So the two-income trap idea.
Two-income trap, so there's more consumption, so GDP goes up, but did living standards actually improve as a result of that? And my argument is that, in fact, the technological progress has not been what people think. So living standards have not improved in meaningful ways in the sense of, are people healthier? Are they living longer? Are they forming families? Are they having more kids? Like, those are very simple metrics that you can strip away all of this sort of economics profession and the metrics that they like to use. Let's just talk about it in a common sense way. Are you healthy? Are you happy? Do you have a family? Do you have kids? Yeah. People self-report as being less happy. There's much more disease, particularly inflammatory type disease like heart disease and diabetes than there were previously, and people just aren't living that much longer. And so the fact that people are consuming more, to me, does not strike me as compelling evidence that their living standards have gone up. And so this begs the harder question, which is, what do we do about it?
Is there any way that you could actually have, like some sort of dashboard that measures GDP, but also like 5 other variables? Like, are there other things that we should be actively measuring and monitoring?
Oh, no, 100% we should be looking at those things. I mean, look, the GDP is an abstraction, right? It can be useful for certain things. I'm not saying it isn't, but there is a sense, especially if you watch CNBC or Bloomberg or something, GDP went up 2.5%. The trick is to say, that means things are good. Well, it's better than if it's going down. I mean, I guess I'll grant you that. But let's just go back to those basic things about, is the amount of Are the amount of pharmaceuticals being consumed by Americans going up or down? America represents like 4% of the world population. Depending on the stat you look at, Americans consume something like 50 or 60% of all pharmaceuticals produced in the world. Why? We don't have noticeably longer lifespans than anybody. We have shorter lifespans than a lot of our OECD peer countries.
Don't really smoke much anymore.
Don't really smoke, so it's not that. So something else is going on. So I would suggest, why don't we go back to just basics? Are people living longer? Are they living healthier? Meaning, are they more active as they get older too? And and are they able to lead sort of dignified, meaningful lives at the median without doing something extraordinary?
Yeah.
And those are the things I think we need to be really focusing in on to see, is the country moving in right direction, wrong direction?
Yeah. And so last question for you. Public policy can be a blunt instrument, and even if you do, win the White House, take over political power, oftentimes you really can only do, one, two or three things and actually get those across the finish line. So what would you say are, 1 to 2 things on the economic side and family policy side that would make a tangible impact in improving the quality of the middle class and family life in this country?
There's a couple things, and this is a political economy conference, so there's a spiritual element to this. I think that's real and it's important. It's probably a little bit outside of our purview today. But in terms of just public policy, I would suggest that anything that makes it easier for people to have families and children is good. So. Child allowance, I think, is probably an imperfect tool, but it's one that I think is good. It makes it easier for people to have.
How do you think about, like Senator Rubio this morning talked about how he supports, child basically tax credits, but he's against the child tax allowance because he says it disincentivizes work. To what extent does pro-work, pro-family need to go together, or do you not care about that?
Yeah, it disincentivizes work. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it incentivizes families to have a parent at home with their kids. And so when I hear, and Senator Rubio is not the only one on the right to say things like this. Well, we want more people in the workforce. Maybe, but I would suggest we want more parents raising their own kids, right? I mean, this is like the trap of measuring everything by consumption. If you even have a kid, which is or more than one, and both parents are working, what does that mean? The kids have to go someplace. So when they're very young, maybe they go to daycare. So wow, the GDP just went up more because now you're paying a daycare service. I would suggest to people that the most conservative, the most vital, life-affirming position is that parents should be raising their own kids. They should not be hiring surrogates to do it. So in terms of other public policy, I'm going to talk about this later, but I do have sort of like my big wish list items too, besides sort of natalist policies, which I'm generally supportive of. But one of the things that I think would be really interesting is to sort of reinvigorate the idea of America as a frontier country. So America obviously founded on the eastern seaboard, and we pushed west over a few hundred years, and then in the early 20th century, the frontier effectively closes. But it's possible, maybe I would hope, maybe to reinvigorate that a little bit with the idea of creating a legal framework in which people could create intentional communities where they could build something new. So there's this idea of charter cities that's out there. That's one way to go about it, but I would suggest that it would be a good idea to allow people to experiment and to build something that is really as de novo as possible, and to see what those communities wind up looking like. And that may be giving people a big project and allowing them to work on it with people that they choose, I think is something that could really spark the American spirit of ingenuity.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much, Chris. Look forward to hearing your panel later on.
Yep. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.